Welcome to the Marconi Studios at Sandford Mill. The camera I have here is an interesting one, as it's the same type that was used at the Queen's coronation in 1953. They had big problems of getting permission to film the coronation in the Abbey. They wanted just the lords and ladies there. But Peter Dimmock, and with a lot of help from the press, got agreement that they could have a trial. So they had a trial in there. They de-rigged an outside broadcast vehicle and had 4 or 5 cameras in the Abbey. Everything was done. One big problem they had was there was a rule that there shall be no close-ups of the Queen. So they did the rehearsal, and on the day they did the rehearsal on a wide-angle lens. On the morning of the coronation itself, they actually swung the lens to a large lens, and the coronation went ahead. Peter Dimmock was the director, and there was a guy in the control room called Ben, whose main task was to switch to another camera if there were any close-ups. Anyway, the Queen had been crowned. She was coming down the aisle, and she got closer and closer, and Ben looked at Peter Dimmock, and Peter looked at Ben, and they both said, "That's not a close-up, is it?" And the rest is history. The pictures you saw were the close-ups. We will now move on from this camera. Oh, before I move on, some of you may recognise, if you watch Sports Personality of the Year, the trophy for the Sports Personality of the Year is actually a Mark II Marconi camera. Carrying on with the Marconi range of TV cameras, this is a Marconi Mark III, which is from about 1954 onwards. 4 lenses on it. The older people will remember this as the camera that was used on Grandstand, and the opening sequence would show this rotating, the lenses rotating. Onto the Mark IV camera. This was our most successful camera. We made over 900 of those, and one of our biggest markets was actually in the United States, with the production companies using them, and also, surprisingly, the United States Navy, as they used these on aircraft carriers for training pilots. They had 3 on an aircraft carrier. The pilot would come in, land on the aircraft carrier, and immediately he could go down below and be debriefed, because each of the cameras was videotaped. Videotape was big in those days, though. Jumping to the Mark VI camera, this had a smaller pickup tube in and was the last of the black and white cameras we made, and this would be mid-60s. Let's move on to the colour cameras. This big beast here, 3 large pickup tubes in it. We actually built an outside broadcast vehicle for a company called Intertel, who were using them to do shows from the London Palladium, both for use in this country and in the United States. They're so heavy that it used to take 4 of us to lift them. And even the colour monitor in the outside broadcast vehicle, we used to have a block and tackle, and you wheel the monitor out, put it on the block and hook it onto the block and tackle and lower it, because it was too heavy to move yourself. The control unit is there. This is just part of the control unit for that camera. Moving on from the very large colour camera, this was the next one that we made, which is the Marconi Mark VII, which was used at the BBC. It was very successful also in the United States. Later on, this was in the 60s, late 60s, and then we moved on to the other colour cameras, which I'll show you in a minute. Continuing from the Mark 7 we talked about earlier on, the last cameras that we built in the 80s, 70s through the 80s, this is actually a Mark 9. As you can see, it's ex-London television, weekend television, and the other camera is actually ex-TVAM. We've got both of these operational thanks to a lot of work by the engineering staff here, who are, luckily, most of them are ex-Marconi. And you're welcome to come and see us at any open day. And you can actually be a cameraman or person.